Hey everybody, Tekking101 here, and I'm a little bit late to the party on this. I understand this news broke a few days ago, but this is not just going to be a video on the news that the One Piece editor recently stated that we are now halfway through Whole Cake Island and that the Wano country arc will start next year in 2017. Alright, there's the news. I put a link to the article below, but that's the gist of it. This is also going to be a discussion very broadly about Wano Kuni and what's it going to be like and the certain things that we're going to expect to see there. But before we get to that, let me just give some brief thoughts on the Whole Cake Island arc thing, how fast that's going by, how many chapters we should have left, and stuff of that nature. So I hope you get ready, get some snacks going. Right, so the news that we are now halfway through the Whole Cake Island arc, I think a lot of One Piece fans found that very jarring, because this was supposed to be a big thing. It was like, oh my god, Luffy taking on one of the fucking Yonko, one of the strongest 4 pirates in the entire New World. This arc is going to be huge, you know? And now we're halfway through it, and I'm not to say that nothing has happened in this arc up until now. We got Sanji's backstory, which in and itself I think was very fucking emotional and very relevant to the course of the series, as well as the, you know, the confrontation between Sanji and Luffy, as well as some other stuff going on, you know, expanding upon the Charlotte family and Big Mom's crew and everything like that. But yeah, I will say that I did feel it was going to be a little bit longer than this. Now, the beginning of the Whole Cake Island arc, or the Tato Land arc, by most accounts that I'm looking at, as with like the One Piece Wikia, it's looking at around chapter 823 when it was officially, you know, kicked off. Maybe you have a little bit of a discrepancy with that. Maybe it's a little bit, you know, after that or before that, whatever. In and around chapter 823. It was titled The World Abuzz, if you want to go check that out, and maybe you can gauge if you really want to consider that the beginning of the Tato Land arc. But give or take a few chapters, and considering that this is now the halfway point where we are right now, at chapter 849, it's going to be in and around 50 chapters total, the Whole Cake Island arc. Maybe a little bit more than that, a little bit less than that, but it's going to be in and around 50 chapters for the Whole Cake Island arc. You know, look, I'm under the idea, like, that doesn't necessarily mean, guys, that Big Mom's gonna be defeated by the end of this arc. It doesn't mean that. It just means that that's the end of the Whole Cake Island arc. Now, you could look at every other, you know, arc of One Piece, and the big bad, the big, you know, the villain of that arc, you know, always gets defeated by the end of it. That's usually what goes down. There's a few exceptions with that, as with the Marineford, of course, you know, and shit like that. But usually how it goes is Luffy ends up on an island or in some location, beats the shit out of the strongest person there, and then they keep on sailing. You know, Annie's Lobby, Rob Lucci was taken out. Impel Down, Magellan was taken out. You know, or at least he was defeated, you know, something like that. But I'm just saying there's no guarantee that in the next 25 or something chapters, you know, Big Mom is going to be completely defeated and decimated, and the entire Charlotte family is going to be left in a fucking wake. I do think that Sanji is going to be rescued, which was the goal of this whole thing to start with, you know. I think they even brought up, you know, like, we're not here to take down Big Mom. We're not here to take down the fucking, you know, Yonko. We're just here to rescue Sanji and get the fuck out. So, I'm under the impression that that's going to go down, but the complete decimation of Big Mom and her entire pirate crew, taking out of the ranks of the Yonko, that shit, I would be very fucking surprised if that went down. Right, so those are my thoughts on Whole Cake Island. Now, moving on to the main topic of this video, Wano Kuni 2017. Now, this is something that not just I am excited for, and the rest of the One Piece fandom is excited for. We've been pumped for this shit since, like, the better part of a decade. In fact, I think it might be over a decade. This was back in fucking Thriller Bark, when Ryuma, remember Ryuma, the zombie that fought against Zoro, had Brook's shadow? He hailed from Wano Kuni. Actually, he hailed from a one-shot manga called Monsters that Oda wrote way back in the day before One Piece, which I guess included Wano Kuni as a location. But no, that's where he came from. You know, he lived there, and then he died, and then, you know, he was like a national treasure of that country. He had an awesome sword called Shusui, which he gave Zoro, which is his black sword. I guess Hogback or Moria at some point must have, you know, snuck into Wano Kuni and stolen his fucking body and then reanimated him as a zombie. But anyway, yeah, that was our first hint that, you know, place existed. Later on, later on it was mentioned by Ace very briefly. It was the location where he learned how to, you know, make a casa hat for Oars Jr. But then finally it was mentioned the big time when we got to Punk Hazard, when we got the introduction of Kinemon, who was a samurai from there, and Brook has a little bit of knowledge of that as well. Now, I don't know if Brook has knowledge of that place because he went there before, or he just was really learned about the place, or because since Ryuma stole his shadow, or his shadow was in Ryuma, that he learned a lot about it. I don't know, but Brook gave the backstory that Wano Kuni Kuni is kind of an isolated country. It's not allied with the world government. It's a place that's just kind of all on its own, just living their own life, and that's the kind of deal it is. It's very, the themes of it are obviously feudalistic Japan. I'm going to get to that in a second, but not just me and not just the rest of the fandom are excited for this. Oda himself has been yearning to draw this arc. I wouldn't be surprised if Oda is sitting at his fucking desk this year and just be like, fuck this, I want to get to Wano Kuni. I'm not saying he's gonna rush through it like the Whole Cake Island shit, but you know that he had a big fucking Wano Kuni boner. He's even mentioned it in SBSs before. He can't wait until he starts drawing it. He's a huge fan of different samurai movies and shit like that. He hinted at like, oh man, it's just gonna be a fucking reference cavalcade when we get to Wano Kuni. All the different references from all these different samurai movies and lore. Oh, it's gonna be amazing. Because we all know Oda loves to insert those little like movie references and shit throughout. It's mostly Japanese film, which is why most American and Western audiences don't get it, but it's in there somewhere, along with pandas. But that was all just the backstory of Wano Kuni. What we really found out was in the Zou arc was really the importance of Wano Kuni, you know, why it's, you know, what's going on behind the borders of the country, the shit that really we're gonna have to tackle once we get there, that shit that's going on. So, Oda did a great job of building, you know, to this. You know, he introduced, you know, we had Kinemon in Punk Hazard, and that built upon it a little bit, and Momosuke later on in Punk Hazard. Then eventually we had Kanjuro in Dressrosa. So kind of like, saying it's like, oh yeah, we're building to something. We're setting up the characters so you guys can get adjusted to them and get excited for it. Something is eventually big is going to go down in Wano Kuni. So we thought Momosuke was Kinemon's son at the time when he was introduced, and then Kanjuro was a fellow samurai, and they were traveling together, and then we knew they were traveling to Zou, but along the way, Kanjuro got captured in Dressrosa, and then eventually Kinemon ended up, and Momosuke ended up in Punk Hazard, and then, you know, the whole thing happened with Law. You know, Kinemon's body got separated, Momosuke got separated, got kidnapped by Caesar, he ate one of the artificial smiles, turned into a dragon, you know how shit happens. But eventually all that shit got pieced together. Eventually Momosuke reunited with Kinemon, Kinemon got his body back, they went to Dressrosa, they rescued Kanjuro. I'm like, alright, now everything's set to go, we can get to our original destination was Zou. And once we get there and we get that really emotional moment with the minks and we find out that the samurai were actually looking for their friend Raizo the ninja, and that the minks saved him from Jack's, you know, the Jack raided Zou and he was looking for Raizo, but those minks, goddamn minks, man, they would not back down. True friendship. And then we find out the meaning of the Wano Kuni and the Kozuki clan, which Kinemon is part of. Kinemon is a vassal of the Kozuki clan. I apologize. Momosuke is the true member of the Kozuki clan. And the Kozuki clan, the head of it, the former head of it, Kozuki Oden, was actually the daimyo of all of Wano Kuni. He was the daimyo. Now, what happened was, you had the Shogun, which was above the daimyo, and then Kaido showed up, one of the four emperors, and he allied with the Shogun, and then they teamed up, killed the daimyo, killed Oden, Momosuke's father, leaving Momosuke as the heir of the Kozuki clan, and then they escaped, and they got out of there. Kinemon was kind of, you know, pretending to be his father for just to keep up appearances and everything like that, but they were basically his protectors, and that's, you know, they had to get to Zou and everything like that to kind of, you know, get help from the minks and Itarashi and Nekomamushi. They had to get help from them, essentially, from the shit that went down, Kaido allying with the Shogun. Now, I'm gonna throw up, because this is all feudalistic, and this might be a little bit confusing, daimyos and shoguns and shit like that. Here is a pyramid, a hierarchy of how it worked in the feudalistic Japan. I guarantee you this is how it's going to be for One Piece, how Wano Kuni is going to operate. Oda might take a few creative licenses with this. He might change some things around. I can even guarantee you that we're probably going to get a diagram very similar to this once we get to Wano Kuni. But just to lay it over for you really quick, it's a caste system. You have the upper classes and the lower classes, and then you have the figureheads of the entire nation. So at the bottom, we have the merchants, or the chonin. The merchants were considered the lowest class because they made their living off of selling other people's work, which was just, you know, that was, no, you reap what you sow, I guess. That was a big, you know, thing back then, and, you know, that's not what they were, so that's at the lowest class. Artisans are people that worked with, like, woodworking and shit like that. There was even some of them that managed to work with blacksmiths, for instance, and then that's where, you know, they would make a good living selling swords and other such weaponry for the higher classes. So there was a few of the artisans that became, you know, higher up. The highest of the lower classes, this might be kind of funny because this might seem like the lowest of the low, are the peasant class. Now, the peasants also made up about 90% of the population in feudal Japan, and these were the farmers. Okay, so that was the lower classes. Going up, you then have the Ronin, or the wandering samurai of lore. The Ronin were basically like sellswords. You know, they were basically samurai that weren't having allegiance to a master or anybody. They would just kind of wander around the countryside looking for work. You know, be like, hey, I need a motherfucker killed. I'm like, all right, I'll go do that for you. You know, those were the Ronin. Beyond the Ronin, then you get to the samurai, the actual professional warrior class system of feudal Japan. At one point, they even ruled over the entire country as the ruling class, but that's a story for another day. The samurai, of course, they had a lot of higher up. They're basically the hired arms of the higher class up, like of the shogun, for instance. You know, they were like their top warriors, you know, spending their entire life, you know, in the way of the sword and bushido and shit like that. Okay, then after the samurai, you get to the daimyo. Now, the daimyo did have power. They were like nobles, right? But there was a class even higher than them. There's technically two, but really there's only one. The class above the daimyo, which, you know, remember Odin, Momonosuke's father, was the daimyo. He ranked pretty high, but, you know, the shogun was higher than him. Now, the shogun is, for all intensive purposes, the leader of the country. Okay, so, you know, we have the emperor beyond the shogun at the very tip top of the pyramid, but the emperor was more or less just a figurehead. You know, he was the one that would appoint the daimyos and the samurai and shit like that, but he was basically just a figurehead serving as like the spiritual leader of the country. You have to have the one person that actually everyone can look to as like, oh, he's the king of us all, he's what we're fighting for, he is the emperor. Did not have any legitimate power beyond just appointing other people. You know, he didn't have anything beyond that. The true leader of the country, and I can guarantee you this is what's going to happen with the Wano Kuni, is going to be the shogun. We don't know who the shogun is, but Kaido is allied with him, so we can understand the shogun is a bad dude. The shogun is probably going to be one of the main antagonists, if not the main antagonist of Wano Kuni. So I just wanted to lay that out for you really quick, the general layout of feudalistic society in Japan during this time period, which we're probably going to be getting into, so I hope you take something away from that. We're probably still going to get an emperor as well, but he's probably once again just going to be a figurehead. Maybe he might want to help out everybody, I don't know, but he doesn't have any real power, essentially. So, that's that. Remember that we also have the people that are already on Wano. They split into 4 groups on Zou. We had Luffy's group and Pekom's and Nami and Chopper. They went to Whole Cake Island to go rescue Sanji. And then we had the group that stayed on Zou, Inuarashi and Momonosuke. They wanted to stay on Zou. Momonosuke wanted to stay on Zou to kind of convey, connection with Zunenshia, the elephant that actually is the country of Zou. He heard its voice and he wanted to commune with it a little bit more, and we wanted to figure out what's up with that. So there was that group. Then we had Nekomamushi's group that went on to search for Marco and the remainder of the Whitebeard pirates, and then finally we had the group that went to Wano. We had Law, we had Zoro, and I would also assume Frankie and Robin in that group. And then we had Kinemon and Kanjuro, and then that group, of course. So they're going to Wano. Now, they could already be there for all we know. In fact, one of the things I think Oda might do with this, I don't know if he is, but we have the end of the Whole Cake Island arc, and we don't actually have the scene where it's like Luffy and Nami and Chopper and Sanji, they all leave Whole Cake Island and then they arrive in Wano Kuni. They arrive there and they meet up with everybody. We might very well get a little bit of a time period here where we just focus on the group that landed on Wano Kuni, that landed at the island. We might just get a few chapters with, like, okay, here's Zoro and Frankie and Robin and Kinemon and Kanjuro all and Law and, arriving on the island and just doing their initial shit. And then maybe later on in like a quarter or a third of the way through the Wano Kuni arc, because I could guarantee you Wano Kuni is going to be long. All right, I know I thought Whole Cake Island was going to be a decently long arc. I mean, it's okay. It's, Zou was shorter, of course. Coming off of Dressrosa, which was 100 chapters long, Wano Kuni might be very similar to that. It might be probably not as long as Dressrosa, but like I said, Oda's been ruminating on this for a while, so I would expect probably a decently sized arc between 70 or 100 chapters, I would say. If it was any shorter than 70 or 60 chapters. I would be kind of very disappointed in that. But hey, who knows what's going to go down. But yeah, I don't think it's going to be as simple, because I'm trying to think, like, unless, like, we kick off the end game for Whole Cake Island, like, in the next few chapters, we kick off, you know, what's going to happen for Big Mom, you know, what's going to happen with Sanji. I really think, though, it's just going to mostly be the wedding ceremony. They're going to crash the wedding, get the fuck out of there with Sanji. There's going to be a fight against the Germa. There's going to be a fight against Big Mom. But I don't think that whole thing is going to end with, you know, Big Mom being, you know, just defeated, and then Sanji gets freed and sails off with Luffy and like, all right, let's go to Wano. You know, I think it's going to be a little bit different than that on how that's going to be incorporated. Who knows? I might be wrong. But yeah, once we get to that, I don't know what's going to go down. I would hope to say that at the end of the Wano Kuni arc, after everything is said and done, you know, it's Momosuke that eventually takes his throne as the leader of the country, the proper daimyo or shogun or whatever. The shogun is obviously corrupt in some way, so he has to get taken out. We have no idea what's going to go down with Kaido, though, because we have the shogun and you have Kaido. I mean, I don't know. However you're going to do this, I don't know. There's going to be a lot of fucking blood involved. Because how do you do that? How do you even do that? Like, Big Mom's one thing. You might be able to, like, you know, you might be able to get out of Whole Cake Island alive, you know, with Big Mom. The odds are very unlikely, but you might be able to weasel your way out. Kaido, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that just lets you go, you know? He seems like the kind of motherfucker that can, like, if he gets pissed enough, he could sink an entire island if he wants to. With his force of, like, his entire pirate crew. Each have, you know, different zone type devil fruits and shit. I don't know. But that's what I would like to see. I would like to see, well, Kaido splitting an island in half. That would be pretty cool. But also, a little bit of scenes here where we see, you know, Raizo and Kinemon and everybody arriving on Wano with Zoro, you know, not really referencing Luffy yet, just seeing what's up with them. I'm really interested to see how Zoro responds to this. Zoro is actually in the country where Ryuma hailed, and he has Shusui. And remember, when Kinemon first noticed that Zoro had Shusui, you know, he was pissed at him. He's like, what? You were the one that defiled the grave of our national hero, and you stole his sword! And Zoro's like, no, you don't understand. Your national hero came back to life as a zombie, and I fought him, and I won, by the way. And on his second deathbed, he threw me the sword, and, you know, I just took it. You know, I needed one. I had this other one, Yubashiri, but it kind of got rusted into oblivion by this weird guy with a big, you know, newsboy's cap on. Long story there. But yeah, your national treasure came back as a zombie, then I killed him, then he gave me his sword. What's weird about that? And I guess Kinemon just like, all right, we'll talk about that later or whatever. I don't know, but he accepted it. But now he's going to the country where it is. He better keep that shit under wraps, because you see, I can see Zoro just wandering around, getting lost on Wano Kuni, and then he asks somebody for directions, and he's like, oh yeah, sure, you can go to the... Wait a second, is that our national treasure shoes? Oh, and then everyone just, like, national emergency, just chasing after Zoro, trying to fucking get that sword back. It's gonna be crazy. Yeah, so, hey, let's talk about Raizo for a second, though. Where you might be wondering where ninjas fit on this little hierarchy here, where ninjas fit in there. Well, first off, ninjas were not a class in Japan. Well, technically they were, kind of, not really. What happened with ninjas, and how they fit into this whole feudalistic mess, is that the ninjas were basically the peasant class. You know, it was very apparent that they were the lower class, but they were also the majority of the population. They were 90% of the population, yet they had none of the wealth. They were basically bullied around by that. That's why you had to have such a strong military. You had the samurai and shit to keep the peasants in line and shit. One-on-one fight, there's no way that a lowly peasant farmer, or even just a few, are going to take on a samurai. A samurai has the best armor, the best weapons. He's been training in the fucking art of the sword for his entire fucking life. You know, there's no way that they're going to, like, just, you know, like, I'm not going to let you steal our shit anymore, samurai. So what happened was a few of the farmers got together and decided, all right, we can't take this shit anymore, but we also cannot win against the samurai in a fair fight. So what we need to do is we need to, you know, be stealthy, and we need to do this shit behind the back. black, and it's not very honorable, but they're fucking starving to death, okay? So they need to do this shit. So that's where they, hey, dress up in all black, very stealthy, sneak in, using poisons, poison, that's how you kill people without having to fight them. And that's why also a lot of ninja tools, like the Kusarigama, for instance, look like modified farming implements. You take a scythe, and you wrap a chain around it, and boom, you have your fucking weapon. You get fucking eggs from a chicken, and then you have a special method where you extract the yolk from a chicken, and then you manage to coat it with a type of resin to get it a little bit, harder, and then you blow in a bunch of fucking crushed glass or whatever, and then boom, you have a black egg. And then a fucking samurai comes rocking up to you, and you throw that shit right in his fucking helmet. There's no protective eyewear back then. Fucking shreds their eyes apart so you can fucking beat the shit out of them while they're staggering around swinging their sword like they're fucking blind, because they are. That's where the fucking ninjas came from, okay? So, there you go. That, in case you were curious, a little bit of history lesson for you there. Alright, well anyway, this was a big, sizable video here, but I hope I understood, I gave you a little bit of a backstory of what I hope to happen in Wano Kuni, the backstory of exactly the feudalistic society that, Oda's gonna try to go for here. Like I said, probably gonna take a few creative licenses with it. I don't think we're gonna get every one of these social classes recognized, but I hope he does reference it in some way. He does mention the turmoil within the classes, and maybe he leads a revolt against the Shogun and Kaido and some shit like that. Even maybe gets the Ronin on the samurai on his side. I don't know, but hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really am pumped for 2017 and for Wano Kuni, and I hope to see some more of our favorite samurai buddies, Kinemon. I hope to see Kinemon cut fire again, because that was so badass. Yeah, and I hope to see some more shitty drawings from Kanjuro and some crazy ninjutsu shit from Raizo. So, hope you guys enjoyed the video. This will be Tekking101 signing out. Hoo-yah!